Hey everybody, this is Andy Hall, and you are watching Best Advice Ever, episode number 4. This is the show where guests come on and talk about the best advice they ever got professionally, as well as the best tip they ever got for being a better person. This week, or this episode, we have Jonathan Pearce. Jonathan is a blogger, a philosopher, a teacher. He is a man amongst men. That is who he is. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm just wondering whether my advice is therefore the 4th best advice ever, and we'll just continually go down the ladder of advice with the more guests you get on.
I think so. Well, not all advice is are created the same, and this is the best advice for you, my friend.
Yes, I like what you did there. Yes.
So we are telling your story.
Yes. Well, I suppose my first piece of advice, I have 2 pieces of advice to give.
Sure.
Actually, I have lots of advice, but we will only have time to do 2 bits of cliched advice. And I'm sorry if they're kind of like meh. But my first piece of advice is if you want a job doing, you've got to do it yourself. And this is something that has really carried me through an awful lot of. In fact, it's responsible in some way for where I am today. In by point of fact of being an author and a philosopher and all these things, which life doesn't just happen to you, right? You've got to go out and kind of make it happen. You make your own luck. You put yourself in these situations. And I suppose in a way you've got to be the confident person or the right kind of person to be able to put yourself in these positions. But, books don't write themselves. And at one point, sort of 9 years ago, I thought, right, I've got a book in me about whether we have free will. And I've got to go out and do it. There's no one else that's going to write that book for me from my point of view, saying the things that I want to say. And so you kind of grasp these opportunities. And then it came that like I couldn't be bothered to just pimp out my book to all these agents and stuff. So I thought I'm gonna set up a publishing company. And then because if you want it doing, you've got to do it. And then I was like, well, okay, so I've got this entity. Let's go and get some authors on board. And it's not waiting for things to happen to me. You've got to go out and do these things. And that's across all the contexts of life. It's about getting philosophical qualifications, going out and doing that. It's about so I've got multiple sclerosis, and I spoke to you on your other project, Naked Diner, and I spoke to you about my treatment for multiple sclerosis. Now I've got a type of MS where in Britain there's no treatment for it. So the only treatment is stem cell therapy, and the only viable option for me was to go and get that done privately in Moscow. So it's a case of, right, I've got to go out, and if I want to get the best treatment and get myself back to where I think I should be and where I think I will be able to get to, then I've got to get this treatment. And I can't let my health service, or not deliver to me what I think I should be able to get. And so it's not a case of sitting back and watching yourself get progressively more disabled, right?
Right.
So it's like, right, this is offered in Moscow. The best place is in Moscow. You do your research. I've got to raise £40,000. Okay, I've got to go and raise £40,000. If I want this job doing, if I want the best healthcare for myself, I've got to go out and get it. Because do you know what? No one else is going to do it for me, really. Apart from the fundraising, the help, but that's by me going out and coordinating that, right?
Right, £40,000. That's like 60,000 American dollars, from what I understand.
Yeah,
about that much. So that's a pretty good sum of money.
Yeah, and I don't have that hanging around the house. I checked under the sofa, and it was like £1.27, and then I found some money in the car. It's like £2.34. So I was like, after that, I was like, damn, I've got to go and do some fundraising. So and that's a case of, right, I've got to put myself out there. This is a big sum of money. I've got to go and get it. And you have to make your own luck. You've got to make your own opportunities or grasp those opportunities, and just letting life happen to you, I don't think will allow you to realize the potential that you have in life. We all have a latent potential, but we also have to go and put ourselves in positions where we can realize that potential.
What age of school children do you teach?
So I actually teach pretty young children, 10, 11-year-old children.
Sure.
Which is a lot of people say to me, oh, you should be doing university or secondary school. But I think it's really important to instill in children at that age a sense of critical thinking, a desire to learn themselves, and quite often the tools aren't put in place for children that young. So I teach things like philosophy for children, P4C, which I've spoken to you about before.
Yeah.
And you can really, children come alive when they start talking about really big ideas at that age, where you kind of almost don't imagine they would do. You just think, oh, philosophy and stuff like that's for older people, right? But actually, no, they have some amazing thoughts and ideas, and we just need to unlock that. And so there are really important things, and obviously the basics of education as well. But kind of like I suppose in my dream world, I do think, oh, do you know what? I'd like to teach philosophy at university or
so for those young children, how do you try to instill this sense of agency and assertiveness? Because I'm sure you have all kinds of kids. You have passive kids, and you have more assertive kids.
So I don't want to completely unpick your idea about asking for the best advice ever, because I also don't believe in free will. And here's this really interesting tension. And this is why I said at the beginning, you've got to be the sort of person who is going to go and act on these things. You've got to be the sort of person that has that confidence to be able to go and grasp the nettle or take the opportunity or whatever. And so, advice is only as good as the ears it kind of falls on. Hey, that's a bit of meta advice.
That is some better advice, yes.
And I suppose you could talk about the seed, that biblical story about sowing the seeds and falling on the paths and and fertile. That's kind of relevant here in a kind of generic sense that advice, you can't change the genetic and biological disposition of a child, right? But sure. Actually we're finding out more and more that in this kind of movement of neuroconstructivism, this idea that actually the brain has far more plasticity than we gave it credit for, and definitely contextually you can change brains a lot more than we maybe have thought in the past. And so therefore actually there is a great importance to drip feeding these ideas to children so that they actually can take them on board and change their ways or become people they might not have become on the path that they were on. But again, if you don't believe in free will, then it's all kind of like,
I would have to and I'm an idiot. I make that well known. But I always thought about when I am interacting with another person and trying to influence what they're saying, it's about degrees of freedom. If they only have a degree of freedom about a particular idea or way of being this way, maybe they don't know of any other way, and maybe just like opening that doorway a little bit, opening up that window.
Yeah, without wanting to get onto a massive debate about free will, of course, they need to be the sort of person who would have that door open, and they need to be the sort of person who would be able to let that small degree affect them in a kind of, I don't know, butterfly's wings kind of way. So it's all about, it's still that same issue. But I think we lead our lives as if we have this kind of idea of free will, as if like, you're going to change someone's path, even though the idea of changing a path, if you don't believe in free will, is incoherent. Do you know what I mean? So sure. So we live, it's kind of like free will illusionism, and I think more and more exactly. I adhere to that kind of ideal. But then if I still have to act as if I can change people's lives, because otherwise you just wouldn't get out of bed in the morning, and that's what we call fatalism. And as a psychological position, fatalism is really dangerous.
Well, tell me how I'm wrong on this. I mean, if you have like a chemical compound, for example, and as a teacher, if the chemical compounds are children and you're a teacher, I mean, or an adult, trying to help a person along the way, you're trying to be some kind of catalyst maybe, or some kind of enzyme, some kind of catalyst to cause some kind of reaction that maybe they wouldn't have had before.
Yeah.
And with that, free will isn't really necessary. It's more like, oh, my neurochemicals are somehow interacting with your neurochemicals to behave in a different way. I have a psychology background, and this is about as smart as I get, Jonathan.
Well, it's about being a link in the chain of causality, isn't it? But
it is.
And I think it is easy to become fatalistic when you start thinking about the fact that, well, actually, I'm just doing what I would do in the situation I'm in, and the children are doing what they would do in the situation they're in, and so I think it can be. I mean, this is the argument about whether free will is dangerous or not. The idea of knowing that free will is false is either dangerous or beneficial, and the argument's still out there, and the jury's still out as to whether there's a philosopher called Saul Smolanski who wrote a book on how free will doesn't exist, but he said, but don't tell anyone, it's really dangerous.
It's a useful tool. It's a useful tool.
Yeah, and for me that jury is still out. I think it has possibly evolutionary benefit, but yeah. But interestingly, talking about like opening those doors. So my second piece of advice. So the first piece of advice is, go out and grasp these opportunities, because life doesn't just happen to you.
No, I have to ask you, did you learn that on your own, or did your dad tell you, or your mom tell you, or a friend or some kind of authority figure or mentor help you with that? Or were you always an assertive kid and this is just something you figured out on your own?
That's a really good question. I think possibly a bit of everything there. So I've been the sort of person who would go out and you're thinking, right, there's nothing limiting me. You look at other people and you think, well, if they can do that. I mean, lots of ideas come into my head right now. So I remember once redoing my kitchen in my old house, and I just thought, there's nothing a carpenter has other than knowledge about how to do things that I can't do as another human being. It's not like they have a magical ability to be able to cut this wood in this particular way or do this. I just need to make sure I have the right tools to do the job, and then I can do the job by just researching it, maybe practicing a little bit or whatever. So I actually bought my kitchen in my old house, and it was quite simple. It was just two sides. I didn't have to cut any corners and stuff. It's just two sides of the room, and I bought the kitchen cheaply, like a nice kitchen, and then put it in myself, and I actually hooked up the gas, although you're not supposed to do that and stuff.
Hooked up the gas.
Shh, don't tell anyone. But anyway, the point being is that right, is looking at these situations and saying, right, if another human being has done it, then I just need the knowledge to be able to do that. So therefore, it's just gaining that knowledge and then doing it, because I've got two capable hands, and in that particular context, therefore I can do that thing. Whereas some people would be, oh no, I must book someone in and pay £2,000 to have my kitchen or whatever, and so that's these days that's my mode of thinking. Here's a problem. I just need the knowledge to be able to sort it out. So to fix this issue, whether it be like writing a book, I just need to know how to do that. And you can research anything these days. The internet's an amazing place, and so I don't have a philosophy qualification. I just need to get the knowledge to be able to do that. So yes, I need to have a brain that's capable of taking in that knowledge, and that is your biology and your genetics over which you have less degree of control. It's the idea that I'm advising that if you want to achieve something, you just need the knowledge to go out and do that, and then just do it. Just go out and do it. You shouldn't be held back by thinking that you aren't able or in a position to be able to achieve any given thing. Obviously, there are going to be physical and some mental constraints for people that they just can't. And I teach, it's interesting. Going back to teaching, I teach some children who just can't learn maths, right? Who just don't have the brain circuitry. They have dyscalculia, or dyslexia, or certain things in their brains that mean that they find it more difficult to learn certain things. And obviously, no child is a tabula rasa, right? It's a blank state. You are coming to the table with a set of biological, mechanisms and genetic dispositions, but in general terms, you can achieve an awful lot of things, a wide range of things. It's just having that confidence to go out and do that.
Right.
So my second piece of advice would be, in opening those doors, especially in children, but in everyone, is question everything. I'm bringing back a bit of X-Files here. I'm sure that was
sure.
So I wrote a book called The Little Book of Unholy Questions, where I wrote 501 questions to God. And I'd just like to say, after maybe 5-6 years of writing that book, she still hasn't answered any of them. So, but I always write, when I do talks and sell those books, and I sign that book, I always put, thanks for buying this book. Question everything, brackets, apart from everything in this book, close brackets. Yeah. I'm all for questioning everything apart from me. I say that to my kids, question everything, but don't question me. What I say goes.
Right.
The hypocrisy. But the idea, so Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, said the easiest person to fool is yourself. And so when you come to questioning everything includes, and almost especially so, includes yourself. So when you make a claim, I often give public talks, right? And I've been to certain audiences which have been, they've been predominantly Christians, say, or have a large contingent of Christians in there. And I, as an atheist philosopher, will give the talk. And in the beginning, I say, I'm not going to change your minds at all. So talking about changing minds, I'm not going to change your minds. You've come here and you maybe want an argument, but basically what I will say, the rational arguments, evidence I will give, a stronger Christian than you were when you started. So my advice to them would be, question why you believe things. And that's my advice to myself, is whenever I put a blog piece out there or make a claim, I not only do I have to defend that claim with rational evidence, but I also need to think about why I'm making that claim. What is so this is motivated reasoning. So why do I believe that? Not just on rational evidence, because I could just be adding that afterwards, but what are the reasons? What are those psychological reasons that are driving my belief? And if I can understand them, then actually I'm in a much better position to understand why I believe things, and therefore whether I've got really good reasons as well for believing that, but also understanding other people and why they believe things. And it puts me in a better position to unlock their belief and reasoning as well.
I always say that our brain's default mechanism is kind of like a cul-de-sac. It just kind of goes around in circles in many ways. That's one of my metaphors for brains that I tell my kids, at least, and the reason why they really have to be thinking about things and questioning things, and in a methodical way.
Yeah. So, but particularly themselves. So we are motivated reasoners, and whereas a Christian will believe that they're going to go to heaven. They definitely believe that they'll go to heaven. Their idea of their mortality is really managed well, because they think that as soon as they die, they're going to have paradise for eternity, and that is really difficult to beat. But if I can understand that as being, to me, that's a psychological argument for theism. If I understand that really, when I'm challenging your denial of evolution, what I'm doing is you're challenging your everlasting life in paradise. And if I understand what that psychological reasoning is for your belief, then I've got a better chance of being able to deal with your theism. Does that make sense?
It does. But so now I'm going to ask you, because I'm an American and you're a Brit. How does this play out with talking to people who are Brexiteers, my friend?
The same way it plays out with people talking to Trump. So what this is, actually, that's a really good parallel or thing to bring into this conversation, because I would argue that predominantly people who vote for Trump and Brexit are doing so on us and them mentality. So
Completely.
if you there's a really interesting book called How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley, which and it's basically all about us and them. Fascism is built on the idea of us and them, fascistic politics. But also there's an amazing book called Behave, about our best and worst sort of behavior, and that's written by Robert Sapolsky. It's like 800 pages long. It's a big old book. But again, the whole basis of that book is the best and worst behaviors of humanity are wrapped up in us and them psychology, and so therefore it's unpicking why do we have us and them. And we can have us and them in our in group. So when we start arguing people in our own group, but also in our in group to out group. So when you're talking about national identity, when you talk about British people who really are strong on us and them, that is what's going to be underwriting their idea that we can make Britain great again by coming out. Europe is kind of like the out group, the enemy, but I don't mean in a kind of warlike enemy. It's like, it's just it's a tribalism that underwrites everything, I think, in a Brexit approach, but also in a Trump approach. So your Republicans are really going down kind of like sort of racial lines, I think, and us and them mentality, and that is what's really underwriting politics in America, to the point where the us and them are now becoming Republicans and Democrats. It's not even like black and white. It's a polarization of identity, where you get, I don't know if you saw the picture of those Republican people at a Trump rally wearing I'd rather vote for the Ruskies than for the Democrats.
I saw that, yeah.
So you have this situation where us and them politics or psychology is so prevalent that in order to you won't, what's that saying? You won't reason someone out of a position they haven't reasoned themselves into. So if it's a purely psychological or initially a psychological sort of feeling and psyche that gets them into whatever belief it is, and then they add the rational arguments afterwards, then you giving them rational arguments out of that position just ain't going to work.
Yeah. So how do you crack that nut then, brother?
Well, so normalization is a really, really important thing. So is it any surprise that the biggest voting areas of Brexit, which generally, and I know Brexiteers hate to say, it's not just about immigration, but actually if you look at the stats, it's mainly about immigration, really. The largest, the areas of most prevalent leave voting was the areas with the least amount of immigration. So you are much more scared of immigration in areas where it hasn't happened. But in places like London, which is an absolute, smorgasbord of cultural integration, you have a scenario whereby they voted predominantly Remain, and that is no coincidence. So that normalization, if you live, and I know I wrote a book called, or I edited a book of deconversion accounts called Beyond an Absence of Faith, and one of the accounts was really interesting. So it's a guy who was an evangelical Christian who came out his initial sort of deconversion started with having some gay friends and realizing that they were just really happily married, two gay men who were really happily married, and said, these are really good people, yet I'm told that they're going to go to hell. How do I reconcile that? And so the normalization of these people around me who are gay then said, right, they are normal people. I therefore can't hold on to that's what was the unpicking of his beliefs, and I think that's the case. So it's about, if you live amongst European people and work with them, and then say, right, this what I believe is going to be at odds with what I know about these people. So I think normalization is a huge aspect to that, but as for rational arguments, I don't know that there are many. I've produced shed loads of rational arguments against Republicans and against Brexit to diehard believers, adherents to both positions, and it's water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
I mean, my own father told me, he's a staunch Brexiteer, he's become more and more so, and he is like, you won't convince me out of this. When someone says to you, there's nothing you can do to convince me, then there probably is nothing you can do to convince them.
Well, especially if you're his son, he just doesn't want to hear anything new from you.
Oh, how true is that? Yeah, but that's really, oh my goodness. So that's really fascinating. So when you want to change people's viewpoints, to be a member of the in-group or to be the right person to do so is really, really important. So that father-son relationship has its issues, whereby actually that threatening, like, you're my son, you can't tell me, that's a really difficult thing for me to cope with if you have completely different opinion to mine. So, and the same with, so I had a conservative Christian friend, the guy that started up the Tippling Philosophers with me, the group of people that we go and meet in the pub and talk philosophy. Conservative Christian, and we used to argue about evolution for years, and I used to present him just the same arguments over and over. I was like, why is this not convincing you? And then he wrote an email, obviously sowed a seed. He wrote an email to Simon Conway Morris, who's I think a Cambridge theistic evolutionist, who then said all the same arguments as I gave, right? And then that was what ended up starting to convince this guy of evolution. So the content was identical, but the person who delivered it was different. And
that's the lever right there. That's the point. That's how you get people to change, is by getting someone who they respect and someone within their own tribe to basically state the arguments.
You're absolutely right. So this is why there's a lot of importance right now. This is very topical. So is it Justin Amash, the only Republican who's come out and said, I think we should consider impeachment. Now, that's really important for convincing other Republicans. Elizabeth Warren, I think it's great, but she's just going to annoy.
She's not convincing any Republican.
Pelosi ain't going to be doing it. You can list every single Democrat, Ocasio-Cortez, she's absolutely brilliant, but man, they hate her, death threats and all that. But if you get one of their own to come out and say, not too sure about this, I think that we've got some issues with our commander-in-chief, then you have some Republican. He got a standing ovation in his town hall speech the other day. Now, whether that was full of Democrats or not, I don't know. But the idea is that, you have to be convinced. You're more likely to be convinced by people who are going to be more influential to you, and they are going to be people who are more like you. I think it was Jonathan Haidt that said, imagine you're riding on top of an elephant and someone else is riding on top of an elephant. You just need to kind of nudge them out the way, and just nudging them, towards a slightly different belief, and then a slightly different belief and a slightly different belief. I think that's a more healthy changing of mind than someone. I wonder if it's true that a militant, really evangelical Christian, when they deconvert, becomes a militant atheist. When people do 180 switches, do they?
I think people are who they are. I know this is circular reasoning there, but if you have a character that's going to be radical, I think that kernel of personhood, you're going to become a radical whatever, whether you're a radical Marxist or a radical Christian or a radical Muslim. There's just this kernel of personality, of personhood there.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. So it's a lot more complex than just the position. It's their personality, which is embedded within that position, right? So yes, but I think if you're going to change someone's mind, I think gently nudging them, over time, then that's your best bet. But you have to be the right elephant rider. Okay, and it's just and that's sad because but actually this is really important for politics. So you've got to have the right person at the helm. We're talking about in Britain who should lead whichever party, and every party at the moment is led by people who are just not charismatic. And therefore aren't going to bring people along with them, apart from Nigel Farage. He's charismatic like Hitler was, in my opinion, right?
Sure.
But he's the only one that's driving people towards him like a magnet, bringing people pulling them towards him. And there's no other party, there's no other leader in any other party that has that. And so therefore, changing people's mind is about being that right person.
Yeah, true enough. I think this is a good place to end. I think we covered a lot of bases, my friend. Yeah,
well, as always. Yeah, that's because what happens is you let me talk and I just go, blah, but question everything.
Question everything. Very important. Very important. And once again, the big takeaway is when you're trying to change people's minds, use people within that tribe to infiltrate the tribe, turn some people, and then try to have them, influence the people around them. Yeah.
And that's why moderates are so important.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with you on that. If we're going to get out of this mess regarding Trumpism and nationalism and fascism, that's the way out, or a way out at least.
Because otherwise you just polarize and have too big. Yeah. But sorry, I'm going on.
No. Well, hey man, where can people find you online?
A Tippling Philosopher at Patheos, non-religious channel, where you blog as well, where all the legends blog.
Legends.
Yes. And on YouTube, A Tippling Philosopher. Just look for A Tippling Philosopher.
You do good videos. I like the videos that you do over there.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'm going to try and get back to doing more of them. So, yeah. And in fact, I'm going to interview you at some point. So.
All right. You'll get what you'll get. I think you know what. By this time, you've been on the Naked Diner enough times, and you'll know what you get.
Good stuff.
All right, man. Well, thanks again.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.